Hi there everyone. This week, 5 big principles. Today, the principle is learn from the past. Learn from the past. That was our 4th major principle that we looked at and then that guided us through the last 6 or so months, really. Learn from the past. Now, the first 3 were, strictly speaking, biblical principles taken directly from the Bible. But this one, the 4th one, learn from the past. Well, we said that we could learn from how churches had responded to different situations. We could learn from how churches had responded to the flu epidemic of 1918 and some of the churches in Washington DC, and there was a link and we could see how they'd responded, how they'd submitted to the authorities, cared for human life, and ultimately petitioned the government so that they could return and start to meet together, initially outdoors and gradually move back into normality. However, what I would say is even this principle of learning from the past, actually it's thoroughly a biblical principle. It's not just a wise and sensible principle. The Bible repeatedly encourages people to learn from the past. God's people often fail to do this, especially in the Old Testament. You see that, failing to learn from and remember the past. But we should have a healthy respect for history as Christians. Now, I'm bound to say that, studied history, I love history. You'll know that if you've listened to any of my teaching. I often refer to historical examples. But it's true, as Christians we ought to have a healthy respect for the past and for history. We live in a culture which emphasises the here and now, the immediate, but we can't understand our present if we don't or fail to understand our past. And this has wide application for Christians. There's loads of directions we could go in with this. This is a really important principle for us, especially in a culture which is quite rootless and ungrounded. For us as Christians to be grounded in the past is very important. But here's just one example of how this helps us. There is a very rich history and heritage of Christian engagement with and reflection on the plagues and the pestilences. Christians lived through these things before. What we're experiencing now is not unprecedented. How our society has responded to the virus, that is unprecedented in some ways. But the actual thing itself is not unprecedented at all. Christians have lived through these things before, and there's lots of Christian leaders, the great reformers, the Puritans, others, reflecting on things that we're now experiencing. They reflected on things like what we would now call social distancing, isolation, quarantine, all of these things. They were reflecting on this hundreds of years ago. The closure of churches by the magistrate due to pestilence and when that was appropriate and why that might be an appropriate thing. They reflected on these things a long time ago, and we can learn a lot from them and how they reflected on these things. So the 4th big principle, learn from the past.